Good afternoon. My name is Milos Dunjic, and today I'm going to moderate the panel of distinguished experts on the subject of international remittance. International remittance is a rapidly evolving area with many fintechs and many established financial institutions and payment networks that are trying to crack the nut and solve it to the best for the customer. And today I have Jim, Kushank, Abdul, and Kamran, who are all experts in this area. And I would first introduce a little bit something about myself. I work for TD Bank. I lead Payments Innovation Technology Group and lab prototyping and playing with different technologies, preparing the organization for what's coming in the next horizon of the payment technology and services. So I would let each of the gentlemen introduce themselves, and probably they could provide a little fun fact that made their life a little bit more enjoyable or less enjoyable during the pandemic. So, Kushank, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. First of all, thank you, Milos, for this is a very distinguished panel, and I'm very happy and glad to be present here among all of you. I am Kushank Rastogi. I work at TD at Enterprise Payment Strategy Group. I kind of have a unique, and I was fortunate, have been to have very unique role at TD, where my role is to help our line of businesses to help them articulate and establish 3 to 5 year product strategy for in and around payments. I also get a liberty to explore white space opportunities around payments and unearth new revenue opportunities which are not BAU and off the shelf, and also unearth new payment experiences that may or may not perhaps realize into short-term revenue opportunities. And given I do all of this, I also is expected to help our various executives to understand what's happening in the market. So yeah, very excited to be here, and this is very relevant. And delivery is also our focus, right? So not only the thought process, we strive and we thrive on delivering our ideas. And here we are in about international remittance, looking to give you a debrief of what we think and how we are innovative here. And yeah, a fun fact: pandemic. I honestly say this is a great opportunity for me, who have a 2-year-old daughter, to spend time with them and quality time. And now she turned 3 within the pandemic. So yeah, I'm enjoying that time. So over to you, Jim. Yeah.
So Jim Filice, VP of New Payments in Canada for Visa. You know, I have the opportunity to really consider payments for today as well as those yet to be reimagined. So for me, what I'm most excited about is how new payments can really change the lives of Canadians and make them better. You know, with so much happening in real-time payments, global money movement, you know, the focus of our team is to really think beyond traditional payments, you know, consider new ways for consumers and businesses ultimately to exchange value. So it's an exciting time in Canada to be in payments, and I'm happy to be able to partner with a lot of great organizations. You know, when I think of the pandemic, I think of, you know, what's our path to getting back to normal. And, you know, for those of you that are hockey fans, you know, when I think of the hockey playoffs, Toronto, it's June, Toronto's out of the playoffs. The Montreal Canadiens are still in the playoffs. And so, you know, I think that's one really nice sign that things are actually starting to get back to normal. And, you know, we're getting through this strange period of the pandemic.
Abdul, you want to go next?
Hi, my name is Abdul. I am the founder, CEO at Buckzy Payments. Buckzy is in the business of enabling real-time international remittances. We are building a rail. So my goal is to establish rails worldwide for real-time settlement that is 24/7, 365-day available. and that's around Buckzy. In terms of pandemic, I two things I never enjoyed until pandemic was going for groceries and just driving around without any destination, which I kind of picked up an appreciation for during this pandemic. So I see that I'm starting to enjoy going for groceries and certainly getting a drive outside. So that's my experience.
It certainly feels like going out on a date to the grocery store. Kamran.
Yeah, again, very happy to be here and amongst the awesome panelists and the audience. So I've been very lucky to be part of the payments technology delivery and solutioning for over 20 years with two Canadian banks, working across different segments of clients, retail, business banking, corporate clients, and bill pay, ACH, EFT, wire payment as a few payment instruments. Recently, I've been working in TD, in faster payments technology, and that has two parts to it. One is around Interact e-transfer, which also evolves into Interact Instant and moving into payments Canada real-time rail, especially around clearing and settlement that we all know about. The second part that's the topic of discussion here is around TD Global Transfer, also known as International Remittance Marketplace for some, enabling clients to send money over 200 countries in different forms, cash, card, account. So that's my gig within TD. A bit of news. Last week was my last week in TD. So I'm a proud TD alumni, and in that token, I'm also a proud CIBC alumni as well, based on my career experience. So I've joined a Fintech, and Fintech, guess what? Fintech is also in payments. The name is Payfare, and they are focusing on workers in gig economy around the globe, enabling gig workers to have on-demand and instant access to their earnings. In terms of pandemic, couple of things. So a funny one is in the beginning of pandemic, I think it was a year back, April-May timeframe. So one day, short story, my wife came back and said, Kamran, go back to the office, because when you were working in the office, you were coming late, but you were home when you were home. Right now, you're working around the clock. So that's a joke, but on the serious side of things, I think as we all go through the pandemic, it's really critical to look after the mental health and also making sure that they're not burnouts, as the two lives, professional and personal, kind of overlap each other. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you, gentlemen. Let's get right to the matter. So international remittance, whenever I talk to people, I find out that different people have different views and different understanding what international remittance actually is. So it may mean different things to different people. So let's try to set the context first. Kushank, let me start with you. How would you describe international remittance as a transaction, and how are they different than other international transaction types?
Yeah, I think that's a fair distinction to be made. I would say that international remittance is a subset of broader international payments as a whole. We recognize international payments as small value, high volume transactions, and typically $500 to $1,000, depending upon how you are sending and where you're sending money to. I would say that historically, banks for hundreds of years are known for sending large value international payments, right? And the business, technology, and risk considerations are very different than the small value, high volume transactions, which is typically international remittances, right? And I see that there's a niche sector where other fintechs and historically large fintechs like Western Union have actually captured that market, understanding the customer needs, and have grown, and at least if not better, but at par with what the banks have set up, right? So I would again say that small value, high volume transaction and different business technology risk categorization, typically historically done by immigrants to their friends and family back home, support them as they move around the globe. But as we see globalization happening in the workforce sector, gig economy, more and more segment are doing international remittances, and COVID has definitely accelerated everything altogether.
Yep.
Yeah, that's my point of view. Yeah.
Okay, so let's move to you, Jim. From Visa's perspective, Visa is a global player, global payment network that provides a ton of services to the banks, to fintechs, and to customers as well. So how does Visa as a global player sees this space, and why are small value, high frequency transactions so interesting and gaining attention of customers and service providers?
Yeah, thanks, Milos, and I think Kushank had it right. I mean, the reality is the need for people to move money across borders is certainly not new, but the reality is that for most of these experiences, they've been somewhat expensive, a little slow, and the reality is the uncertainty of the experience itself is what has been a problem, and up until now, and I think that's probably the challenges that we're trying to solve for. While there's still a lot more that we need to do, the introduction of new digital experiences from fintechs and banks have really improved that experience and at the same time enhanced security, reduced costs. And as Kushank mentioned, this is money sent by foreign workers to their home countries. These are lifelines for millions of migrant workers and their families. Not only for their families, but in fact, it actually boosts the GDP of many countries around the world. According to World Bank data, there's as many as 28 countries that receive up to 20% of their GDP via remittances. And so Canada is one of the top 10 send countries globally. So for us at Visa, what we're committed to is supporting our partners, with that security, the compliance, the global reach that helps deliver that best experience possible, not only for the sender, but also the receiver on the other end, right? And this will help ensure that Canadians have access to that secure, reliable money movement options that can be delivered to cards, bank accounts, wallets around the world, and by a much needed, trusted brand, right? Which is very important in the experience of Canadians that are sending money back home to family. That really helps them live.
Yeah. Now, when we heard from two big players, let's hear what fintech has to say. Abdul, for a fintech focused on international remittances, what are the main areas where you focus Buckzy as your company?
Thank you, Milos. I think Buckzy is focused on enabling real-time capabilities for international payments. And we kind of focus on, the experience that elevates the traditional remittance to the next level, that is making it 24/7, 365 days available. It's not anymore just a bank to bank. We are kind of expanding that into bank to wallet. And we're also launching another product that can do bank to debit prepaid kind of channels. So, Buckzy is kind of focused on innovation on the cross-border international remittance side that elevates the traditional cross-border payments experience.
Jim, you mentioned that millions and maybe even hundreds of millions of people rely on international remittances around the world. And can you provide your opinion and experience? What would be their main needs and expectations that need to be met by any service provider?
Yeah, it's clear that international remittances deliver that much needed solution to millions worldwide. And this is especially the case during a pandemic, right? If we put ourselves into the shoes of these 250 million workers around the world who rely on this service to move money to their families, remittances aren't about splitting lunch or splitting a cab ride. International remittances, they pay medical bills, they pay utilities, they pay for those basic needs, and actually, in fact, can actually help families reduce poverty digitally initiated and received remittances have proven indispensable during the pandemic, because if you think about it, those physical locations where people were putting cash in or taking cash out, one, weren't always open or not available, but also not very safe, right? There's someone carrying a pocket full of cash in a lot of countries and going home is just not a safe thing. So in addition to being faster and more transparent than traditional remittances, digital remittances are actually more affordable and more secure. One of the challenges right now is the vast majority of digital remittances are still picked up in cash on the other end. And so, when we think about working with our providers, we know that if we can improve the digital receipt of funds of these remittances, there's likely about 3 to 4% of costs at least baked in that we can further pull out of the cost of these remittances. So when we have really true digital receipt on the receiving end, costs can come down, and in fact, we can actually help as a community. We can help better serve this critical population.
Yep, I fully agree. Abdul, like in terms of this type of service being and becoming table stakes, like what is your opinion? Obviously, you formed and founded a startup that is solely focused on this type of service. So for you, that definitely means that you believe that they are table stakes for banks and fintechs. Can you elaborate?
Yeah, sure. So I strongly believe international remittances are becoming, table stakes for banks and certainly fintechs, driven by market demands and growth opportunity due to globalization, more and more migration in certain countries, and so 15 years back, most of the international payments were, you kind of walk into a bank branch and then fill out the form to do a Swift wire, and that's changing, and that change is driven by technology, these mobile devices that's very normal in today's life, and so that has shaped. And certainly the innovations that fintechs have played in helping transform this space, for creating better digital experiences. Now, banks, starting with the big banks, have started investing heavily into making it more user-friendly, better experience, cost-effective, and so on. So it's becoming a norm, and I think in the next 5 to 8 years, we talk about real time as an innovation, but I think in the next 5 to 8 years, that's going to be the norm. And people expect that, if I am a customer, I would like to see the bank offer a mobile app that can do my domestic and international transfers and so forth. So it's becoming a norm, and I think it's going to continue shaping with all the innovations and technologies that's out there. Right from real time to IoT based payments, and all that is kind of coming into the mainstream.
Yeah, that is definitely the case. I fully agree. Which leads me to Kushank, who works for the big bank, and how does rapid digital transformation that Abdul and Jim mentioned and adoption help the bank like TD address international remittance needs of its clients?
Yeah, I think there has to be a first realization that we are dealing with two sets of customers here. There's a sender as a customer and the receiver as a customer, right? And definitely there's a complexity of customer needs on both sides, right? When you look at from sender perspective, that are TD customers or any bank customers, right? Their needs are very different in a developed world, right? They want a digital solution. They trust banks for doing transactions for their money and finances. So at TD, we pride ourselves from a digital experience perspective, right? We are very serious about keeping our trust factor with our customers when they enter into TD digital properties. We are curating the right customer experience and help the senders to transact with confidence, right? With the player of the choice, right? And it may not be TD, right? Because in this space, as I said, there are players, and we recognize that we are not the experts, right? And because it's such complex, right? If you look at it from the distribution perspective in 200 plus countries, the receivers have different payout requirements. Receivers want full value on their account, or they want cash. In certain countries, there are limits to even receive money. That they are very complex customer needs, right? And we recognize that our job is to help our customers, that is senders, to transact with confidence because they trust us, right? So we are investing heavily into our digital capabilities and also our vision of providing a curated experience of marketplace where we help them to choose and the player of their choice, right? And is the key for us. And that's about it. Security, reliability, and costs on the send side. More and more payout options, different regulatory regimes on the receive side. Enabling those with the right partnership is the other side of the story.
Interesting. So, Abdul, how does Buckzy, as a aspiring fintech in international remittance area, complies with mandatory and very diverse regional AML and KYC requirements that are connected to international remittance service?
Yeah, thanks, Milos, for that question. I think that's certainly, when you're kind of building out this real-time experience and digital experience, this is one of the key components of problem solving that you have to do. And so Buckzy has built its own stack, technology services on the platform to heavily automate that process to meet whether it's a KYB or a KYC compliance demands that's required from originating country and has to also comply with the receiving country as well. So certainly those services are underlying our complex algorithms to screen every transaction to satisfy AML guidelines, policies for originating country as well as the recipient country. We do use a lot of technology underlying like AI, machine learning to optimize and create efficient and intelligent way to kind of handle these transactions. Certainly sourcing reliable data from vendors to screen against is a key to doing a successful AML fraud detection to certainly PEP screening and so on. So it's a combination of technologies, and certainly there's a lot of innovation and efforts that's being put out there to optimize and certainly create a solid solution around AML, KYB, KYC solution out there. Yep.
Okay, so from the global players' point of view, I'm sure Visa has been able to utilize last 50 or 60 years of being one of the main payment networks. So Jim, can you elaborate, how does Visa approach AML, KYC, and satisfying and complying with the standards? Because that's where the secret sauce of many of the service providers surely is.
Yeah, I mean, it's fundamental to our business, right? It's not just across international remittances, but in everything we do. So you can imagine there's a massive amount of attention and focus and resources put in this space. As Abdul pointed out, global regulatory compliance is not something you solve. It's something that's a continuous moving target that never really ends. And so I'm not sure that there's any real magic in what we do. The reality is, we're extremely diligent and in tune with the different regulatory frameworks around the world, right? And in doing so, this allows us to just simply be better partners in enabling our clients to then be compliant in those markets in which they want to operate. I mean, we all know it's tough enough to operate in Canada with the changing regs and the travel rule that's coming in now. How does that translate around the world? And clearly Visa plays a pretty significant role in that, right? And given our global presence, we think we're uniquely positioned to be able to provide that critical insight, into the existing and changing requirements. How we approach things really is four-pronged, right? We do massive due diligence on both the originating and the receiving entities. I mean, that's critical for them to participate. And then the program itself, regardless of the parties or the organizations that are delivering the program, there's rigorous approval process. And then, as Abdul points out, we have system controls, data velocity controls, watch list screening, and everything that's built into the system. And then through AI and other means, we monitor for those unusual transactions. And then compliance is a big thing, right? When we identify those areas, we have an entire compliance team, and it often works with law enforcement in order as required, right? So I'd say, Milos, no real secret sauce, but rather just significant attention and resources that are dedicated around really making sure that the trust and security of these solutions are there, right? Because it's critical for us as a network and critical for our partners.
Yeah, I was really hoping that on Friday lunchtime we can have some secret sauce. So I'll go back to Kamran. Like, Kamran, in your implementation experience within the big bank, how enjoyable was for you to work within and navigate all of the KYC and AML rules that bank imposes to a service, something like this?
Thanks, Milos. Yeah, I would leave the secret sauce for lunchtime, but just building on points from Jim and Abdul. So just before I start on the experience, I think we all acknowledge that banks have a big responsibility, right? To make sure that there's compliance to regulatory, AML sanction screening, and KYC requirements. All banks are obligated to prevent fraud. On the send side, especially when we talk around digital and high volume payments. And the challenge is to keep up with the ever-changing regulatory requirements on the receive side, as was pointed out by the team. So that's where I think bank can seek partnership with trusted players like Visa to adjust rapidly and effectively to ever-changing regulatory and compliance environment, right? Now, stepping back from a technology perspective, if you look at the broader ecosystem, banks and all the players have been dealing with this in the context of wires, and it's not something new from that perspective, right? So why is it changing our world? Why we cannot have in the new world? Why we cannot have a wire room repair concept, or people sitting in the back and repairing payments? It's basically based on the high volume, low value nature of the remittance that we're talking about here. So having at the platform level, having a flexible, configurable platform that can react to things like travel rule that Jim mentioned on the send side, and there could be pieces around field level validation, but there could be also broader components when it comes to account validation and amount validation, limit checks, FX component specific to a certain country and region that will be different from the rest of the world. So we need to be flexible to react to those needs. Also, the other point, maybe this is the closest I can get to secret sauce, is to do upfront validation as much as possible. That's where the client is there in the screen, and then they can correct and update the content. So once it gets downstream, there's less chances for failure. Thank you.
Thanks, Kamran. Kushank, like for TD, who is the leader in international remittance space between big Canadian banks, TD could not do it alone. So how does TD approach the whole subject of partnerships, and how do we use partnerships to launch comprehensive and compelling international remittance service? Can you elaborate?
Yeah, sure. I think, as I said, that this space is dynamic. There was a realization in the bank that, okay, this is complex. We have market leadership and immigrant segment, but there was a time that they were not using us, right? They're going to elsewhere to send money. Why, right? And there was a right realization that, okay, there are core competencies players where and people trust others to send money overseas. And when I look at my example, right, I moved to Canada 7 years back from India. I thought about myself, right? When I moved here, I always saw Western Union logo in India. I always saw the local banks in India, right? And when I moved here, suddenly I was thrown with 5 logos, completely new, of big FIs, and asked me to trust them because they are just a bank, right? Now I'm an evolved customer. I may look at their balance sheet and know that, okay, they are big banks, right? But think about the segment which are moving here, right? And they're new to the country, they would rather trust Western Union because they have seen that logo everywhere, right? And that brand trust is important. And then it is ingrained in their mind of people who are migrating. It takes time for them to build the same level of confidence with the banks here and the brands here. TD as a North American focus, right, can never have a distribution depth like Western Union or Visa, right? Because they are present themselves at 200 plus countries, right? Or we can do that, but it's not cost effective, right? I think in a nutshell, I would say that we realize there's not a single indispensable player in the market that is everything, gives us everything, right? And this place is so dynamic that today, which is the trend, tomorrow it may be past, and we need to have an adaptable and scalable solution. So we kind of have a 4-pronged approach in identifying partnerships. The first and foremost was that how can we have that brand trust with our customers, right? We provide digital properties and confidence in moving money for our customers. That is period. I agree, right? But can we also take a step further and add more trust into the value chain? Trust in the value chain by adding trusted players in the ecosystem, right? So for us, brand recognition of the partner was topmost important, right? Which can bring more legitimacy into the entire solution. And when you think about the brands, it's not about the global brands like Visa, only about the global brands like Visa and Western Union. It's also about the regional core competency brands like maybe Union Pay in China, or maybe Paytm in India, right? So these are the emerging players and people relate to that more, right? The second piece we care about in determining partnership is the distribution network. Very, very important, right? Many players come to us and say that, hey, we are connected to 200 plus countries. But when you go deeper into it and see that, okay, tell me your partnership. Are you your bank themselves? Or you have contractual relationship with the banks, right? And for us, it is important that there is a redundancy plan in place for these partners. You just cannot rely on one banking partnership or any one player for a particular enablement of a corridor. You need more. You need contingency plan. You're dealing with 10 million active digital users in Canada from TD. You cannot rely on just one partnership, right? The third important piece, I would say, is a no-brainer again, is the balanced economics. And not only from the perspective of between TD and that rail or that payment method. It's also about how you enable TD to serve the best pricing to the customer. The transparency in the pricing, no lifting fees, right? So balanced economics is the third factor for us. And of course, as we speak here, no one can take away the technology aspect of it, right? We need an adaptable solution. We need optionality. We need technology to enable customers saying that, okay, if today is blockchain, tomorrow is digital currencies, or day after tomorrow something else comes in, we will be ready to serve those up in the most nimble way. So yeah, that's how we look at partnerships.
Yeah. Well, how many partnerships did Visa make in this space in last year or two, Jim? I'm sure audience is dying to find out that from you.
Yeah, I mean, this is a massive evolving space with a lot of attention, right? I mean, I'll give a shout out to TD's Global Transfer Service. I mean, it's a great example of how pulling together the right partners can really develop a bold market-leading solution. When we think of fintech also quickly partnering with banks, I mean, they're doing this to leverage that massive shift to mobile and online channels during the pandemic. So what we're starting to see is several partnerships developing, between us, fintech, banks, and all kinds of ecosystem players. I think Kushank sort of suggested this, right? Just because we know that the Canadian banks in Canada are trusted, when new Canadians come, they don't have a relationship with these brands. They may have relationships with other brands. And the millennial, as an example, the Millennial Disruption Index suggests that for specific use cases like this one, that relationship with traditional FIs can actually be disrupted, which is not common in Canada, and replaced by fintech, catering to that superior experience, the transparency that they can deliver, and in fact, trust. Where traditionally, I think in Canada, we've always thought the banks were the ones that were, the most trusted. The reality for a lot of these new Canadians, some of these fintech, and certainly in the millennial space, see many of these fintech names as trusted partners. In the early stages of the pandemic, Visa fintech partners like Remitly reported that 4 years of digital growth were compressed into 4 months. So like World Remit, TransferWise, TransferGo, I mean, they all provided similar gains. Each of these fintech actually have strong banking partnerships and are able to offer consumers that more efficient, transparent, cost-effective service. I mean, the bottom line for us is, to deliver that strong partnership. Our role is really about bringing global scale, experience, and trust, not only to banks, but fintech players and intermediaries in the middle. I mean, to make this happen, all focused on delivering trusted, transparent payments globally.
Yeah. Abdul, can you elaborate or provide some details about typical challenges associated with international remittances? How do you solve them? How do you address them? And are there any operational challenges for a fintech like you in this space?
Great question, Milos. Generally, international remittance are complex when compared to domestic payments. And some of these factors we discussed, compliance and risk factors associated with the international remittance, certainly a challenge. Flow of funds are more complex since it has to go through correspondent banking networks. We touched upon that as well. It still remains a challenge. Foreign exchange rate risks associated. So whether it's a bank or a fintech, they have to manage that efficiently, and that creates competitive advantage these days for several players in the space. But when for Buckzy, when you consider what are the challenges on a real-time cross-border or international remittance, it can get even more complex because of how liquidity is managed. Since you're settling in real time, there is how do you manage sanction screening in real time? How is fraud prevention in real time happen? So there's a different take on maybe a more efficient way to do this, these different components that's associated with cross-border is slightly with a different lens you have to look at it. And certainly, there's rules and real-time schemes. When you're sending it to real-time schemes around the world, there are different rules associated with it. For each country, it varies differently. So you have to have a complex, rules engine, that's built in to manage some of these things. So, so that's from an international remittance standpoint. For fintechs, certainly there are several operational challenges. A lot of these fintechs that you see out with the innovative solutions, they are startups or scale-ups, so they go through a lot of operational challenges like setting up a money transfer operating bank account in a country is always time consuming and complex. Unlike a technology startup, fintech focused on international remittances take longer time to establish their systems and processes, and certainly correspondent banking relationship. It takes a little bit more time to get it up and running. So that's certainly a challenge for fintechs. And certainly, I think Jim touched upon this about trust, which is a great point. I think fintechs have to earn the trust. With bank, it comes naturally for consumers. But for a fintech that's new out there, they certainly have to earn the trust. And I think once you earn it, of course, that's a great achievement as well. Yeah. So, and besides all this, there's regulatory cost and burdens that can be, challenging for a fintech that's in a startup mode. So that's what I can think of.
Excellent. Kushank, in your opinion, what would be the main growth areas and opportunities for the bank and banks in general to offer to their customers in this space?
Yeah, I think getting access to payment rails is a starting point, right? And it helps you do plain vanilla remittances, like moving money from one point to another. I think the growth areas around the overlay services you build over it, right? And I say this as the world is moving from plain vanilla remittances to purpose-driven remittances, right? There has to be a purpose around the payment. And I'll always give an example of my mom, right? I used to send money back home so that my mom can pay the electricity bills, right? And there was a one step cut out for her. She needs to go and stand up in a queue to pay the electricity bill then, right? Why can't I just pay her bill directly, right? And the international bill payments is a possibility, right? There are festivals happening. There's a traditions in South Asian countries and Asian countries where you give money in as a form of gifts, right? And can we create experiences around e-gifting, right? And there are international students coming in. Like there's so many overlay services you can build over the current relationship you establish by building the rail. It's immense, right? And that's where I see the growth opportunity. Speed of the payment is courtesy right now, right? Everyone expects fast payments, right? Yeah. Cost of the payments, price of the payment is going down. So it has to have the overlay services, which is the real value over it, right? And that's my take, yeah.
So Jim, can you try to size the opportunity to somehow speculate on the size of the pie? How big it is? And, I'm sure all of these players would like to get a piece of that pie. So how big is the pie?
Yeah, it's quite big, right? When you think about what's happened over the last year, before the pandemic, international remittances were incredibly important. But then you layer on the impact of the lockdowns, the closures of these physical agents where cash was either collected or dispersed, and customers just by nature have quickly shifted to online and mobile channels. Remittances were just part of that, right? Because it's critical that people send money back home. So it wasn't an option just to pause because of the pandemic. In fact, the pandemic probably required us to send more money back home. So some of the largest money transfer organizations reported triple-digit growth, right? Not only in transactions, but also in customer acquisition. So when you think about that trend, it really suggests that this shift is going to have long-term sustainability. And then the cross-border space in general is a massive opportunity for banks, fintech, money movement specialists. When you consider the global trends of immigration, the emerging economies, digital commerce exploding, then you've got small and medium-sized enterprises that are actually operating globally. We think it equates to just over $2 trillion of an opportunity, right? And new entrants in the market, they're transforming and disrupting the cross-border space, creating those new experiences and expectations that it's got to be a mobile first mindset, right? And so what it comes down to really in my mind is that the current crisis has put digital solutions at the center of the way consumers interact every day. And it's changed their behavior, right? From traditional cash-in networks to online. And then when you think about the millennials and the next generation of consumers, that's only going to accelerate growth. So I think the pandemic certainly stimulated something that was already there. And then as we move into, that next generation, growth is just going to continue to explode. So we think $2 trillion is the right number. The reality is there's quite a bit there to be had. And ultimately the goal, though, is to serve this critical population that needs transparency and a reduced cost. And we think digitizing these payment flows will really help us get us there.
Yep. That's definitely true. Kamran, as a seasonal technology executive, can you help all of us and the audience understand how can technology help achieve all of these objectives and, enable optionality and interoperability between anybody who wants to partner with anybody else?
How much time we have? Because I can go for hours.
I'll give you 2 minutes.
Thank you, Milos. Great question, and I'm really passionate about this. Before I go into technology architecture, I think it's really important to understand the product vision and the business architecture side of it. So what I mean by that, you can make some decisions upfront. For instance, how you want to go about architecting the technology, right? There's an option to connect with an aggregator right from the get-go. That's one option. Or you can build the rails individually, like for cash and card and account, and then put the overlay services on top. Kushank has a good analogy around marriage and offsprings. I'll leave it to Kushank to go through that. But the next point is around common components. So with that target state in mind, you can make some decisions around limit management, recipient, transaction history, and those common components can be built across multiple rails, right? So that's another point. And a modern technology for sure helps from a resiliency and security perspective, but it has to be architected with the right target and platform. For instance, if you don't architect your solution for cloud, then lift and shift to cloud does not give you any of those benefits. I think that's another point to be aware of. And having the flexibility around onboarding and offboarding partners. How much do you want to customize versus how much do you want to publish your specifications to the outside world and ecosystem, so that the onboarding and offboarding partners into the marketplace and integration becomes a lot easier. So those are the main points. And having, again, I touched on this, but having a good site reliability engineering right from the get-go baked into your solution for ongoing development and growth and sustained in a sustained manner, right? So I touched on this point, but upfront validation, because now you're dealing with different payment instruments and high volume. Upfront validation is key to all of this to make sure we have the highest straight-through processing possible without a lot of burden on the back office and operations rooms. And this is another piece that's really critical and close to my heart, is around reconciliation. And we are moving towards a world that requires real-time reconciliation and even settlement. So that's another key component. And last but not least, people. It's all about people who bring it to life. So having the right platform team. When I say platform team, these are your software engineers, solution architects, designers, DevOps, quality engineers, solution requirement experts, product owners. I can go on. Having that platform team right from the get-go will help you to actually, when you go and become more of a BU type of a platform, you will have a well-oiled machine to manage your platform, not only from a growth perspective, but also technical debt and overall
sound engineering, resiliency. Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
I think this would wrap our main discussion. We have 10 minutes left for the panel. And we got a question around role that ISO 20022 message standard can play in enabling easy plug and play, or at least easier integration between different partners. Like any of you wants to take on that? Kushank?
Yeah, I can start, and I'm sure
Yeah.
this is a hot topic. Everyone wants to speak
Everyone
about.
wants to
Yeah.
pick in. Absolutely.
Honestly, when I hear ISO in my mind, I get goosebumps. Right? There's so many possibilities. Oh my God! You start thinking on your sleep time, and you're like, oh my God, what is the endless possibility? I feel like patenting every other thing every day. Right? So, anyways, keeping that aside, my excitement aside, but I don't think ISO will. So the challenge I have initially right now, it may evolve in future, is that every rail has their own, and country has their own version of ISO implementation, right? So though there's a standard messaging protocol, right, but interoperability between the ISO messaging between those specific country rails would play a key role, right? And that will require huge effort from some aggregator, some big technology player slash payments player to come together. There are 70 plus real-time payments schemes getting live or already live globally. How would you make them interoperable? How would you make sure that the data exchange in ISO format, their version of ISO format, is interchangeable? That's something that we need to focus on. And the use cases are immense. I can go on and on about it. Think about what you can completely eliminate checks. You can completely eliminate offline invoice payments, right? Invoice sending, right? You can create workflows around payments, but by putting the logic on the payment instruction itself, right? You can add blockchain and ISO together and create so many other use cases around it, right? So lists are endless, and I think every bank is thinking hard how they can be the first one to jump in the wagon. There's clear value for every line of businesses in the
Yep.
bank. Yeah.
I'm getting warnings that we have only 3 minutes left. So any closing remarks from each of you? You have literally probably 30, 40 seconds each. Jim?
Sure. I mean, I guess maybe I'll just carry on the conversation around global interoperability, right? It's a lofty goal, but Visa's role really is all about minimizing that complexity between a sender and receiver, regardless of the network that they're on, right? We believe that we can connect as Visa multiple networks around the world. We can connect not only the Visa network, but also RTPs globally. And to Kushank's point, ISO 20022 is going to have its own flavors in different markets. So we think we have that ability and that role to stitch networks together. We're no longer just Visa Net, as a lot of folks think of us. Our goal is really to connect all networks around the world and make Visa one of the best ways that people transact, both senders and receivers.
No, when I think about ISO 20022, I think of data standards, and when I think about integration, there's a lot of consensus across different institutions, and especially financial institutions, and even in Europe, open banking APIs are getting a lot of traction, and that's the direction they are going to make it interoperable, plug and play kind of integration happen. So in combination of using ISO 20022 with open banking standards, and certainly with the real-time payments coming into mainstream, you're going to hear about these three topics a lot in the next coming years. Yeah.
Okay, so I think we need to start closing. Thank you, guys. That was fantastic discussion. We've covered a lot of ground, and I hope we have answered most of the questions from the audience. There were a couple of questions about how could digital loonie and central bank digital currency be combined with ISO and be used in international remittance market. I think we would need another panel just to cover that, because it's such an interesting area. And thank you for Payments Canada for inviting us and giving us an opportunity to present our own views and views from our own companies. And hopefully the audience had an enjoyable time listening to all of you.
It was a great pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you,
everyone.
Good
Bye-bye.
weekend.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.